What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Inflammation Investigator. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Adrienne Scharli, and she is a nutrition educator and nutritionist who has an amazing story about how she really reversed her own diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. So I'm going to start off really just with letting Adrienne tell you about herself. So, Adrienne, how did you end up here?
Okay, well, we'll get into my story later, but I was diagnosed with MS in 2015, and I ended up healing all my symptoms the same year I was diagnosed. And then, of course, I became very intrigued and interested in health and healing, especially holistically, because that's what I did. And that's, how I became where I am today, right? So I now help other people with MS get well, right? So I became a nutritionist and a MS certified integrative health coach so that I can do that.
Awesome. And I don't want to forget to mention that Adrienne has a podcast about this too. So you'll have to check that out. We'll talk more about that towards the end of this episode. But so what was going on with you when you were diagnosed? What was going on in your body in 2015?
Yeah, well, so I was diagnosed in 2015, but if you back up to 1998, that was a long time ago, I was 28 years old, and I had woken up one day. I had a roommate. I was numb from the chest down, just numb. And then I had pins and needles in my feet. So when I walked around, it was kind of like, when your foot falls asleep and it's really uncomfortable when you walk around? That's how it felt for me for about 30 days. So that was really scary. And my mother was a prior nurse at the time. And so, of course, I called my mother and said, "Hey, mom, this is really weird. This is what I'm feeling. What do I do?" And so this is before cell phones. And in the phone book, I had to use that. But my mother said, "I want you to see a neurologist and then call me back." So that's what I did. I went in and found a local neurologist in the phone book and went in to see him. And he gave me a bunch of physical tests in the office. Like he had me walk a straight line, he had me put my arms out and touch my nose with the tip of my finger. He had me follow the tip of his pen with my eyes. He did a bunch of other physical tests. And I feel like I passed them all. And he sat me down and I said, "Well, what do you think is going on with me?" And he said, "Well, if I could bet on it, you probably have MS, multiple sclerosis." And I thought, oh my God, this is crazy, right? Because I was healthy, I was young, I wasn't overweight. Anyway, I went home, called my mom back, told her what the doctor said. And she said, "Well, don't get diagnosed yet because if you remember back then, insurance was a lot different, right? You kind of got blackballed if you got diagnosed with something as serious as MS. And, you couldn't change insurance companies at that time, and your rates, went up. And anyway, my mom said, well, we don't know if you have it for sure. Let's wait it out. Let's see how you do in 30 days. Just live your best life and let's keep in touch, right? She lived in California. I just moved to Colorado, so I didn't have any family near me. So I thought, okay, put on my smiley face, right? I just tried to be happy, went back to work. I was working in the retail field. I was a manager, I had a stressful job, and I was waitressing at night. So I was stressed out, right? But you know what? Magically, Elizabeth, it went away. So it did dissipate, it did disappear. So after about 30 days, I was back to myself again,
Yes, what we call relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, right? And I just
right?
want to remind everyone why we're talking about MS on the Inflammation Investigator, because MS is an inflammatory disease, and it's inflammation around the myelin sheaths or in the myelin sheath that surround the nerves that cause multiple sclerosis. So what you are relaying to us is so familiar to me. I feel like this is kind of my story too. I had started off with the pins and needles too, and was really told kind of to ignore them for a while, and I did. And then I had another huge MS exacerbation. Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, so it wasn't until 17 years later. So
Wow.
life went on, right? I got into real estate. I was a successful realtor, met my husband there, got married, had a family. And it wasn't until 3 days after I turned 45. And all of a sudden, I woke up in bed and something odd happened again. I had a blind spot in my left eye. And
Mm.
I thought, this is weird, and that's all I had. And I remember telling my husband about it a couple days later, and I said, I got this weird kind of spot in my left eye, and I couldn't see in my peripheral vision, like driving, of course, you have to look over your shoulder. I had a difficult time with that. And so it goes, well, go to the eye doctor and see what you can find out. So that's what I did. And the eye doctor did verify the blind spot in my eye, and then he sent me to a different eye doctor to make sure that it was there. And the first eye doctor said, it could be one of three things. And I said, well, what do you think it is? He goes, well, it could be A, B, or C. And A or B, I don't remember what he said. There were different eye conditions. And C,
Uh-huh.
he said it could be MS. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. This is so odd. This is what my thoughts were. And
Uh-huh.
so after being handed off to a different eye doctor and then my general physician and then neurologist again, and finally this neurologist said, well, let's get you an MRI and a blood test so we can rule some things out. And I said, okay, well, that makes sense. So I came back a couple of days later, got my test results, and there it was. She laid it all out. I had lesions all over my brain and a few down my spine. And she said, I hate to tell you, but you do have MS. And that was the worst day. Elizabeth, you probably remember the day where you were diagnosed. That's a
Oh,
day you
vividly,
don't forget,
vividly.
right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I went home and I cried. It was probably the ugliest cry I've ever had, with my husband.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe I have MS. I don't understand why this is happening to me. So anyway, the doctor said, well, because I went back to her and because she said, I want to get you on a steroid infusion. So that's what I did. Now, my insurance at the time did not cover any major drugs, which is kind of a blessing in disguise, and I'll tell you why later. But she said, I want to get you on this infusion, and then I want to maybe get you started on this trial drug, a drug where I would have had to take, the sugar pill, right? Because they're trying to get this other drug passed with the FDA. In the
Hmm.
meantime, I went and got that 3-day steroid drip, right? So I got that done. But during that time, there was a nurse going around and she was the one giving everybody an IV in this big room. Everybody was sitting in a comfy chair. But she said, Adrienne, I've got MS too. And here's a flyer. Your doctor, Dr. Tammy Miller, is giving a talk this weekend all about MS. You might want to go. And I took it and I said, oh, yeah, of course, I want to learn about this disease as much as I can. And so
Hmm.
I took it. My husband and I went to her talk that weekend, and it was at a nice restaurant in town in Fort Collins, Colorado. That's where I live. And I walked in, and there were about 8 to 10 different tables with white tablecloths on them. And people were coming in, some were in wheelchairs, some had canes. These are all people with MS, right? And so her presentation was at one end of the room, and she had a projector and a screen. And then she had a gentleman with a suit standing next to her. And so my husband and I sat down. Of course, we were served like free drinks, like, lemonade and tea, and of course, all the terrible foods. Like, I mean, it was a nice restaurant. The foods were good, but we were served bread, and we were served calamari, fried food, like foods that aren't healthy for us, right? And I didn't know it at the time, but I'm like, okay, this is kind of fancy. And so she started out with her presentation and she talked all about MS, right? All about the disease. And then the second half of the presentation, she talked about, um, I'm going to talk about this drug. She talked about one drug, just one. And I thought, afterwards, that was a red flag for me. I'm like, I know there's 4 or 5 different drugs on the market. Why is she just talking about one? And so I had to figure this out. And what I realized way later is that that drug company paid her to do that presentation on that drug. And what I found out way later is there's a website, it's called openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. And anybody can go in there and put in your doctor's name or your neurologist's name and find out if that doctor is getting extra money from these different drug companies. And that's what I did. I typed in my doctor's name, and this is like years ago, a couple years ago. But I just want to let everybody know that the so my neurologist was getting she retired in 2025, but in 2024 she got over $850,000 extra from these drug companies. And then also in 2019 and 2020, she got over $1.5 million in both years just from these drug companies. So 57% of doctors are getting paid from these drug companies. Like, I call it under the table, but they have to disclose it now, right? It's on the website. So if anybody's interested in that, the doctors are kind of in on it too. So I just want to tell people this. So anyway, after
They
my
are.
infusion,
You'd think it'd be a conflict of interest, but
yeah, right.
it's standard right now in the medical community.
Yeah, yeah. So after my infusion, about 3 days later, I developed this major, major migraine headache, and I never got headaches before. It felt like somebody hit me in the back of the head with a sledgehammer. And then all my other symptoms came out. So I started getting numbness in my hands and my legs. I started getting brain fog. I had Hermite sign. I know you know what that means, Elizabeth, but that's when you tilt your head forward and you have this like numbing or electric shock go through your body. I
Yeah.
also had vertigo at one time. I also had severe fatigue. I just wanted to sleep all day long. And of course, this happened in the summer. And, when you have MS, you can't handle the heat. So when it's 80 degrees outside, it feels like 120, right? Feels much hotter than it really is. So, anyway, these were the symptoms I had.
Wait, before we go further, so the infusion, which drug was that?
This was a steroid.
So that was Solumedrol, that infusion.
That was what I had, and that's what created all these other symptoms to come out, especially that headache. And I didn't know it at the time, but I figured it out later. I'm like, that drug, my body was reacting to that drug, right?
Right. So for
Steroid
our
is a drug.
listeners, right, our listeners, Solumedrol is a corticosteroid that is given by infusion, typically over a course of days. Your course was 3 days, mine was 5 days back in 1999.
Wow.
It blew out my veins. I looked like a heroin addict. I had track marks all up and down my arms. It was awful. And it's typically given as a first line treatment to reduce severe inflammation
Right.
because inflammation causes permanent damage if it's left too long. But if you can relieve the inflammation, if you can reduce it quickly enough, then you can hopefully prevent some of that long-term permanent damage from happening to the nerves. So just
Yeah.
to bring everyone up to speed, that's why you were having that infusion.
Yeah, yeah. And the doc, of course, I asked her, I said, why am I getting this? And she goes, well, because I want to reduce the inflammation behind your left eye so that hopefully your vision comes back. But my body had the opposite effect. Now, and I do know because I've talked to some people, this drug, the steroid drug, does help some people, but not everybody. Like me, it was awful. Like my body did not like it at all. So, anyway, after I had all those symptoms crop up, right? I was in bed, severe fatigue. I just wanted to sleep all day long. I had a washcloth over my head. Here I was a realtor. I couldn't work. Thank God my husband was a realtor as well because he had to pick up the slack for me. And I
Uh-huh.
couldn't do anything. I couldn't like check my email. I couldn't make any phone calls. I couldn't do anything, Elizabeth. It was awful. So, a week went by and my husband said, we got to tell the kids what's happening. And I'm thinking, I know, I'm still processing. I didn't want to tell anybody yet, right? Because you're still trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And
How old were your kids?
they were older, we were empty nesters at the time. They were all
Oh,
in college. Like the last one
uh-huh.
had just gone to college, but locally,
Uh-huh.
so they lived
Uh-huh.
locally, at the dorm. But so my husband's outside on our back patio telling the kids what's going on with me. I'm in bed, I can't be there. And my two sons were pretty bummed out. My daughter's crying, and my oldest son had his girlfriend with him there, and she just graduated from Colorado State University with her dietetics degree. And so after he told the kids, her name's Sarah, Sarah came up to him and said, Todd, Adrienne can manage her uh-oh,
Oh, I lost your video.
that's a
Can
bummer.
you see me?
I can see you. Can you edit this part out and I'll try to get back on?
If you, I will pause it. How's that sound?
So anyway, Sarah was my oldest son's girlfriend, and she came up to Todd, my husband, later, and she had just got her degree in dietetics from Colorado State University. And so she came up to Todd afterwards and said, Todd, Adrienne can manage her symptoms through diet, because she just learned this. And so Todd told me this later, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. So here I am in bed, I have my laptop in bed, and I'm looking up MS diet, MS diet, MS diet. And I came across Terry Wall's TED Talk by accident, right? So I watched it. It's about 20 minutes long, and I know you know about it, Elizabeth. It was incredible. I heard her story. She, real quick, she was a doctor. She still is a doctor. And she was doing her rounds. She had fourth stage MS in her wheelchair, and she healed herself out of a wheelchair. And I thought, oh my God, if she can do that, I can definitely heal what I got going on. So I ordered her book, and then I just followed her protocol. And within between 9 and 12 weeks, most of my symptoms went away. The only symptom I still had was the blind spot in my left eye. I still had that. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm going to have to live with this, but that's okay. Everything else is gone. So, but I kept up with the diet. And guess what? A couple months later, I healed my eye. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't believe I had this ability. And later on, I figured out, oh my God, we can all heal from MS. We really can. And really from most diseases. So I learned all about, and then I got interested, right, in diet and nutrition and holistic health. And then I became a certified integrative health coach, a nutritionist. So anyway, that's my story.
Yes, wow, that's such a common story. It's really, in so many ways, a lot like my own story. And I love that you took Dr. Walls's story to heart and you applied it to yourself, which is really what the hope is for everyone, right? That they take some of these lessons that we talk about and that other people have used so successfully and they can apply them to themselves. And so, just for anyone who's not that familiar with Dr. Terry Walls, her concept and her strategy is to make sure that you are getting all of the nutrients that your body needs to biochemically function. It was mind blowing to me after my own diagnosis to really start learning how the human body works and understanding, these vitamins, minerals, nutrients, these elements are integral to the way that we function. They're not just extra things that, oh, it's nice if you take vitamin C. These are things that we all need. All these nutrients, pretty much every vitamin or mineral that you've ever heard of is essential for human functioning. And so much of our food supply is processed foods and contaminated with toxins and additives and preservatives that we're not getting those vitamins and minerals, especially if you follow what we call the standard American diet, right?
Yeah.
Which I was guilty of. I don't know about you.
Oh, I
When I was
was.
diagnosed, the staple foods in my pantry at the moment of my own diagnosis were Diet Coke, Crystal Light, and gummy bears.
Wow.
And I felt very good about that diet, and I lived off that diet for about 10 years. And then I ended up with MS.
Oh my gosh. Well, I ate a lot of bread, a lot of
Uh-huh.
pasta, right?
Hmm.
Just I was a lot of grains, too many grains, too much wheat and dairy, Okay, here's what I had for breakfast every day before I was diagnosed. Raisin bran. So I call it the three sins, right? Gluten, sugar, and dairy. I was poisoning myself and I didn't realize it. So what's terrible is, marketing. We're not taught the right things. We're taught, we watch those commercials. They're like, oh, part of a nutritious breakfast. And then they show a tall glass of orange juice next to it, which is also terrible, right? You never want to drink juice because when you drink a glass of orange juice, that's like eating 8 oranges in one sitting, right? You don't want to do that to yourself. It's too much fructose. Yeah, so I learned so much about diet, but I also learned or this is what I thought right away, like after I saw the Terry Walls TED Talk, and by the way, she's gotten over like 4 million views on that talk. And she has changed so many lives. But after I saw it, I thought, oh my God, how come we're not educated on this? This is awful. Like, we should know about this. Like, we should be getting this education in schools, like it as
Yes.
children, and then in
Well,
high
but the
school.
doctors aren't taught this education in medical school. In fact, most doctors graduating from medical school maybe have had one quarter of nutrition. And if
Yeah,
even that,
yeah, yeah. And we have to know about it, right? You just said, Elizabeth, like we get most of the vitamins and minerals from the foods that we eat. And we've got to know what these are. So we need to figure out and learn how to learn. So it's basically a paleo diet, which I'm still on. I'm not as strict as I used to be. I can have I don't even like sugar anymore because once you wean yourself off of sugar, your taste buds don't like it anymore, right? But I can have a small bite of, a small piece of cake once in a while, or I can have, a small treat once in a while. I can go to the Mexican restaurant and have a little bit of chips and salsa, but I don't overdo it, right? Um, but I was very strict with myself for probably 2 years, 2.5 years before I figured out, okay, I can probably, ease up a little bit on the diet because there is a condition called orthorexia nervosa. And if you haven't heard of
Hmm.
that, it means that you have a mental thing about eating clean, and you judge people who don't eat clean. And I was almost there, I would, because I had a friend who had MS and she knew a little bit about diet, but I'd watch her, eat a hamburger and fries in front of me. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, don't you know that's bad for you? Um, but anyway, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, but I learned a lot more things since Terry Walls about health and nutrition. Well, nutrition and of course lifestyle.
There's a lot to learn. So tell me, what are some of the modalities besides diet that you employ for yourself and teach to your clients?
Yeah, so I've got 4 pillars of health that I teach my clients. So number one is diet and
Mhm.
nutrition. Number two is exercise, body movement. Number three is mental health. And number four is self-care. So, of course, we all need to move our bodies. We all know that, right? And you don't have to go to a gym, right? You can go for a 20-minute walk every day, right? But
Hmm.
I also learned that getting outside, getting sunshine on your skin, being outside for 20, 30 minutes a day if you can is super healthy. Also grounding. I didn't know about grounding. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, she also gave me a book about a year later called Earthing. It's right up there. And it's pretty incredible. I didn't know about it. We're not taught about earthing either. Our ancestors knew about it, right? Native Americans knew about it. It's when you walk with your bare feet on the ground on grass or anything natural, and then you're getting all these negative ions that come up through your body and they help balance out your whole body. If you think of wild animals, they're always grounding, always. But we don't, right? We wear rubber-soled shoes and stay indoors a lot of the time, and we don't get those grounding benefits. But there's so many things you could do at home. Like I sleep on grounding sheets. I've got my feet on a grounding pad as I'm talking to you right now, getting benefits. So
Uh-huh.
that's something else I learned. And then besides that, mental health. I had some childhood trauma I had to work out. And this is
Uh-huh.
a lot of people don't realize. And I realized this later is that, I had a mother who was a narcissist. And unfortunately, I had to cut ties with my mom. Still love her in my heart, but you know, I can't have a relationship with her. Love her, but we had to go our separate ways. But that has really been healing for me. And then also self-care. The other thing I learned is later on is that people with autoimmune diseases, 80% are women. And I
That
always
is
wanted to
true.
know why. I always wanted to know why. And it wasn't until I listened to it was a Mel Robbins podcast. I don't know if you
Uh-huh.
that one. But she had a doctor on and they were talking about um, the ACE protocol, so adverse childhood experiences.
Uh-huh.
So if you look back to your childhood, and maybe you don't have childhood trauma, but you might have had another kind of trauma, because there's lots out there. Um, but if you take this ACE test, Um, and I realized I took it and I had childhood trauma. I didn't realize that I did, but I figured out that I did. And so I had to heal this. I had to heal myself, right?
Hmm.
So healing traumas is a part of it as well. And then self-care, right? A lot of us, like I said, 90%, 80% of the people that have autoimmune diseases are women. And why is that? Well, it's because women give too much. We don't take enough. We don't take care of ourselves. So we're mothers, we're nurturers. We take care of everybody else, but not ourselves. So that's what I learned.
What kinds of practices do you advocate for self-care?
Oh gosh, anything that you can do for yourself, besides, going to bed on time when you're tired, like getting plenty of sleep, that's part of it too. You want
Uh-huh.
to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night if you can. But maybe it's reading your favorite trashy novel, Maybe it's playing pickleball with some of your best friends. Maybe it's having family night, with your family. Maybe it's, taking that drawing or painting class you've always thought about doing. It's doing things for yourself that is self-care.
That's a great definition. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, those are the things that I learned that I teach my clients. But the other thing I wanted to tell you was a couple of years after I healed my diagnosis, I thought, I want to write a cookbook. I remember sitting at the breakfast table with my husband, and I just told him, it just came out of my mouth, and I said, I want to write a cookbook. And he said, You're gonna what? I said, Yeah, I'm gonna write a cookbook. And it took me 2.5 years, but I wrote a cookbook called Nourish Your Way to Health, and it's on Amazon. And I had a really hard time changing my diet, especially when I followed the Walls protocol. She had a lot of recipes in the back of her book, but
Uh-huh.
I found them to be pretty bland.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can do this for the rest of my life. I need some flavor in my life. I like to eat, right? So I found all these recipes that I could modify and make them my own. And so that's how I came up with this. And so, I give this away to people who do my program as a part of my coaching, 12-week program. But then after that, I thought, okay, I know I'm not the only one that has healed MS holistically, and I want to find other people and get their stories and have them tell, me what they did so I can put their stories in a book. And so I interviewed 11 other people and I changed the cover of this, but it's called The Path to Reverse Multiple Sclerosis Naturally. And so I interviewed 11 other people, had them tell their stories and how they healed themselves because I wanted people to get the proof, right? Because a lot of people, when you tell them that you've healed from MS, they don't believe you. And so I'm like,
True.
okay, I want the proof. I'm gonna prove to you. I'm gonna interview other people that have done this. And then in between, I've got 12 chapters. So I've got different things that you can do to heal yourself, right? Getting rid of toxins, eating the right diet, exercising, mental health, self-care, getting enough sleep, all these different things where people can help themselves. So that was that other project that I did to help people.
Those are great. And then you also see clients one-on-one in your clinic. Do
I
you,
do.
is that is that face to face or is that virtual?
It's only virtual, yeah, because I help people all over the world. Like the last person I helped was from India.
Nice.
Yeah, so right now I'm helping somebody from California, somebody from Connecticut, all over. So it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Well, this is such a great story. How can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Well, they can go to my website. It's called Nourish Your Way. or they can email me at info@nourisherway.com. And, you know, I try to have a lot of fun with people. All the all the clients that I've had have really turned into friendships, and we have a lot of fun, during our coaching sessions. And, you know, I didn't have a great time on my journey, so I wanted to make a program so that it's as joyful as possible while you're trying to make these changes, because healing can be a fun journey, if you do it the right way. And when people go through my program, I don't give you everything at once. It's kind of like a slow integration. I use a program or a method called crowding out. So I have
Mhm.
people take a hair test, and that tells you what heavy metals you might have in your body, what vitamins and minerals you're low on, and then what food sensitivities that you might have. And also, I have people, it's called a crowding out method. So I have them start putting in the good foods right away. So week one is drinking green smoothies, right? It's your bunch of nutrition from green smoothies. And
Mhm.
then, week two, week three, you're always adding something, you're adding a new habit every week. And so by week number 5 or 6, you don't have any room for the bad stuff anymore, right? So that's how it works.
That's a great strategy. So I realized I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how did you go about healing your childhood trauma? What kinds of therapies were helpful for that?
Oh, well, I did a lot of journaling. That really
Hmm.
helped me. And I tell people, depending on their own traumas, you might need professional help. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. Um, but journaling really helped me get it out all on paper. And then many times what I would do, I would crumple that paper up and I would burn it over a metal trash can. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah.
letting go of all your emotions, like feeling all those emotions, and it's okay. You need to feel them, but then you need to learn to let them go.
That's a great strategy and free, and anyone can use it. And I've personally done that myself in many times and for many reasons, and I love it. It's always, I think, helpful to have a ceremonial aspect when you are releasing these long held internal traumas of any sort. It can
Yeah.
really have, like, actually making that type of formality can make a difference in your mental awareness as to whether it's still there or whether it's gone.
Yeah, and trauma is really a form of its own kind of stress, right? And stress is inflammation.
It is.
Stress-
And, many people believe that everyone who has an autoimmune condition has stored trauma in their body, and that's part of why they tipped over into autoimmunity.
Yeah, yeah, 100% correct.
Excellent. Well, Adrienne, is there anything that you would like to offer the listeners or leave them with before we round this out?
Sure, I'll just give them with one last positive message. And, anybody who's suffering from MS, or it doesn't matter if you've been newly diagnosed or you've had MS for a long time, even if you're in a wheelchair, you can heal. It's possible. It's just going to take you a little bit longer if you're in a wheelchair, and that's okay. You're just really going to have to make these changes and work on it every day, but you can do it. You can do it. And, I want to give people hope, because there's more than hope. You can absolutely heal yourself no matter where you are. So, yeah, that's my message.
Well said. Thank you. And that sounds like a perfect place to end this episode. So thank you for tuning in to the Inflammation Investigator today. And Adrienne, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.